I still remember the exact sound of his voice when he said it, calm, rehearsed, almost amused. "Emily, you're done here. Pack up your things." He said it loudly enough for the entire department to hear. 20 pairs of eyes turned to me. For a moment, time fractured. My hands went cold, my throat went dry, and all I could hear was the blood pounding behind my ears. I was standing there, holding my laptop, a presentation I'd stayed up half the night perfecting still glowing on the projector. I could see my own reflection in the conference room glass, wide-eyed, stunned, as my boss, Mark Clark, gave a little smirk and turned his back on me like I was an afterthought. That was the moment something inside me broke, and something else began. Because when someone publicly humiliates you for their ego, there's a special kind of fire that lights in your chest. And if you play your cards right, that fire can burn their empire down quietly. When I first started at Apex Digital, I was 29, optimistic, and ready to make my mark. It wasn't some massive corporation, just a fast-growing marketing firm in Portland with about 100 employees. The kind of place where people wore sneakers to meetings and brainstormed over cold brew. I loved it immediately. I'd been hired as a marketing strategist, basically the person who turns wild ideas into campaigns that actually make money. The first few months felt like a dream. My boss, Mark Clark, was charismatic, confident, and sharp. He noticed my work early on and told me, "You're the kind of employee I want to build this department around." And I believed him. I stayed late. I volunteered for big accounts. I presented ideas no one else would touch. I was the first one in the office and often the last to leave. My roommate used to joke that I should start paying rent at Apex instead of our apartment. But success makes people notice you, not always in the way you'd hope. At first, Mark praised me constantly. "You're indispensable," he'd say with that charming grin. But then, almost imperceptibly, his tone began to change. Small criticisms crept in. "You're too independent. You're hard to manage. You need to let me take the lead on client presentations." I thought he was just being protective of his team's image, but now I see what was really happening. He liked me when I made him look good. He hated me when I made him look replaceable. About a year into my job, our department landed a massive client, a tech startup with a budget big enough to make everyone's eyes sparkle. Mark put me in charge of the campaign strategy, which meant long nights, endless brainstorming sessions, and sleepless weekends. But I loved it, and it paid off. Our campaign blew past every KPI. The client was thrilled. The CEO of Apex even came down to our floor to congratulate us personally. Everyone clapped, and for once, I thought maybe the late nights had been worth it. Except Mark didn't clap. He stood at the back, arms crossed, looking at me like I'd stolen something. That was the first time I realized he wasn't proud. He was angry. The next few weeks were a blur of subtle sabotage. My reports went missing from shared drives. My credit on project slides was mysteriously removed. Mark started assigning support tasks to me instead of lead strategy roles. When I asked him about it, he'd smile that thin smile and say, "I just need to make sure we're not overloading you, Emily. You've been under a lot of stress lately." It was gaslighting, plain and simple. And the thing about being gaslit by your boss? It's isolating. You start to wonder if you are overreacting, if maybe he's right. But I kept my head down. I told myself, just do good work. The truth always comes out. That Friday morning started like any other. I brought coffee for the team, made sure my presentation was perfect, and even wore my favorite blazer, the one I'd bought after my first raise. We were presenting the quarterly report for our biggest account. I'd spent 2 weeks compiling data, designing slides, and rehearsing every talking point. The meeting went flawlessly. At least, I thought it did. When it ended, Mark said, "Team, can you give me a minute alone with Emily?" Everyone filed out quietly. My heart was pounding. I thought maybe he wanted to talk promotion. But the moment the door shut, he exhaled sharply, turned to me, and said, "I can't keep doing this." "Doing what?" I asked, completely thrown off. "This dynamic. You're undermining me. Clients come to you directly instead of me, and that's not how leadership works." I blinked. "Because you told me to handle client communication, Mark. That's literally my job." He sighed dramatically, leaned against the table, and said, "You're not understanding. I need to reassert control of this department, and that means making some tough calls." Then, right there, in that conference room with the door wide open, he raised his voice and said the words that would stick with me forever. "You're done here. Pack up your things." Gasps from outside, heads turning. My coworker Jake actually dropped his pen. I could have died from humiliation. I stood frozen, my mind spinning. "You're firing me? Why? What did I do wrong?" He shrugged. "Not a good culture fit anymore." A culture fit, the most meaningless phrase in corporate history, and the most convenient weapon for toxic managers. I wanted to scream. Instead, I swallowed hard, nodded, and walked out. The elevator ride down felt like freefall. By the time I reached the parking lot, tears were streaming down my face. Not just from anger, but from betrayal. I had given everything to that place. I had made him look good, and in return, he'd made me his public example. But somewhere in the middle of that pain, something hardened in me. If he wanted to play power games, fine. I'd just make sure I was the one who finished them. For the next 2 days, I barely left my apartment. I cried, yelled, and replayed the scene over and over in my head. Then, on Sunday night, I opened my laptop. If there's one thing about being a strategist, it's that you learn to gather data, evidence, patterns, and I started digging. The first thing I did was pull up my Slack messages with Mark. I found thread after thread of him approving my work, complimenting my campaigns, even telling me, "Don't worry about the metrics, I'll take care of them." Then I remembered something strange. 2 weeks before my firing, I'd been asked to present the same metrics Mark told me not to worry about. He'd claimed the client wasn't happy with results, but I had the dashboard access. I knew the numbers were great, so why lie? That's when I realized Mark had manipulated the reports. He'd manually adjusted the performance sheets to make it look like I'd missed targets, probably to justify firing me without cause. I felt my stomach drop. I took screenshots of everything, the timestamps, the edits, the original dashboards, all of it. But that wasn't all. I found the internal project tracker, something I still had access to because, apparently, IT hadn't revoked my credentials yet. Rookie mistake. And buried in the comments, I found something even juicier. A note from another manager saying, "Mark wants to shift ownership of Emily's campaign to his portfolio before exec review." Ownership, meaning credit. He'd been planning to take my work, label it his, and erase my contributions. It wasn't just personal, it was strategic theft. And suddenly, everything clicked. The sidelining, the public firing, the not a culture fit. He wasn't just trying to get rid of me, he was trying to rewrite history. So I decided I'd rewrite it back. Monday morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Jess, the HR manager. "Jess, HR, hey Emily. I just heard what happened. Would you be open to talking privately?" At first, I hesitated. HR isn't always on your side. But something in her tone felt genuine. I texted back, "Me, sure. When?" "Jess, now, if you're free. Call me." I called her. She sounded tired, like someone who's seen too much office drama for one lifetime. "Emily," she said quietly, "I know this is sensitive, but I need to ask, did Mark ever give you written warnings or performance reviews indicating issues?" "No," I said immediately. "Never." "That's what I thought," she muttered. "He submitted a termination report citing ongoing performance problems, but there's zero documentation to back it up." My pulse quickened because it doesn't exist. Jess sighed. "I can't say much yet, but you're not the only person raising concerns about him. If you have anything that could help us, I'd be grateful." I felt a spark ignite in my chest. "Oh, I have plenty." I spent the next 48 hours assembling a digital war chest. Screenshots, emails, campaign data, timestamps, meeting notes, everything that painted the picture of who Mark really was. When I sent it to Jess, I attached a short message. "For your investigation, he didn't just lie about me. He manipulated company data. I can prove it." She replied 3 minutes later. "Receive. Thank you. You may have just given us what we needed." I closed my laptop, leaned back, and smiled for the first time in days. He had fired me publicly, but I was about to end him privately. It took exactly 5 days for the first crack to appear. On Thursday morning, Jess called me again. Her voice sounded different this time, tighter, more deliberate. "Emily," she said, "you didn't hear this from me, but an internal audit has been opened on Mark Clark." I sat up straight in bed. "An audit? For what?" "Data manipulation and misconduct." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "So, my report?" "It triggered some questions," she said carefully. "We're reviewing all of his recent projects. I can't promise outcomes yet, but let's just say the evidence you provided is very compelling." I thanked her and hung up, but my hands were trembling. He thought he'd humiliated me, but now every decision he'd made was under a microscope. 2 days later, my friend Jake from the office texted me. "Jake, hey, heard through the grapevine. Clark's in trouble. Big trouble. He was called into HR twice this week." "Me? Seriously?" "Jake, yeah. He's been pacing around like a caged animal. Everyone's whispering." I felt a pulse of adrenaline. I imagined him in that same conference room where he'd fired me, sitting on the opposite side of the table this time, trying to explain himself. It wasn't enough yet, but it was a start. Over the next week, I stayed completely silent online. No posts, no rants, no hints of what was happening. I worked quietly on freelance projects, applied for new jobs, and checked my inbox obsessively. Then, on the following Tuesday, an email from Apex's legal department landed in my inbox. "Ms. Emerson, thank you for your cooperation. We'd like to request a brief follow-up interview regarding your documentation of project metrics and communications." I took a deep breath and replied, "Of course, I'm available anytime." The call lasted 45 minutes. 2 lawyers, 1 HR lead, and me. They asked precise questions, dates, names, access logs. I answered calmly, truthfully, and without emotion. When it ended, one of them said, "Thank you. You've been extremely helpful. We'll be in touch soon." That soon turned out to be very soon. 3 days later, Jake texted me again. "Jake, you won't believe this. Clark's on leave. Effective immediately." "Me, leave? As in suspended?" "Jake, worse. They took his badge." I actually had to sit down. It was surreal, hearing those words about the man who'd looked at me like I was disposable. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. I wanted confirmation. That came 2 weeks later, in the form of an email from Jess. "Hi Emily, the investigation into Mark Clark has concluded. As a result of our findings, Apex Digital has terminated his employment effective immediately. We appreciate your integrity and assistance throughout this process. Please know that your professionalism helped us uncover behavior that would have otherwise continued unchecked. Wishing you the best in your future endeavors. Jess, HR lead. I stared at the screen for a full minute before it hit me. He was gone. The same man who'd smiled while firing me in front of my peers had been quietly escorted out of the building. No applause this time. No smug grin. Just silence and a revoked keycard. And I didn't have to raise my voice once. For a long time, I thought I'd feel euphoric, like the end of a movie where the villain gets handcuffed. But what I felt was quieter, cleaner. I went for a walk through downtown Portland that afternoon, and the air felt lighter somehow. I stopped at a cafe I used to visit on lunch breaks. The barista recognized me and said, "Hey, haven't seen you in ages. Still working at that marketing firm?" I smiled. "Not anymore." She laughed. "Good for you. You always looked too stressed there." I didn't explain. I just took my coffee and sat by the window, letting the steam fog the glass. For the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel powerless. I'd taken my humiliation and turned it into justice. Quietly, methodically, perfectly. But the story wasn't over yet, because a few weeks later, Apex came calling again. I'd already moved on emotionally when the email arrived. "Hi Emily, I hope you're doing well. Following recent restructuring, we'd like to invite you to return to Apex Digital on a short-term contract basis to assist with client transition. Best, HR recruitment." I actually laughed out loud. They wanted me back? The same company that had let me be humiliated? I drafted a response, polite but firm. "Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate the offer, but I've moved on to other opportunities. Wishing Apex Digital the best." And I meant it, because revenge isn't really about going back. It's about walking away on your own terms. A few days later, I got another message, this time from Jess personally. "Just so you know, your documentation set a new precedent. We've implemented new HR protocols around public terminations and data access. You genuinely changed things here." That one made me pause. I hadn't just taken down a toxic boss. I'd helped fix a system that enabled him. And that, more than anything, made it worth it. It's been about 6 months since all this happened. I'm in a new job now, better pay, healthier environment, actual work-life balance. My new manager is the polar opposite of Mark Clark, supportive, transparent, and secure enough to let people succeed around him. Sometimes, when I walk into a meeting, I still get flashes of that day, the sound of Clark's voice, the stunned silence of my coworkers. But instead of pain, I feel power, because I survived it. And I won. Jake still keeps me updated from time to time. Apparently, Clark tried to get another job in the industry, but Apex gave a neutral reference. Translation: they told future employers he was not rehirable. Word spread fast. Last I heard, he'd moved to another city, trying to start over. Maybe he'll learn from it, maybe not. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. What I learned: if you've ever been humiliated by someone in power, whether a boss, a teacher, a partner, please hear this. Your quiet strength is your greatest weapon. Mark thought public humiliation was dominance. He thought firing me in front of others would make him untouchable. But all it did was show everyone what kind of person he truly was. I didn't scream. I didn't post rants. I didn't plot anything illegal or dramatic. I just documented, waited, and let the truth destroy him. Revenge doesn't always need fireworks. Sometimes it's a whisper in the right ear at the right time. When I first posted this story here, I didn't expect much. I just wanted closure. But the response blew me away. Thousands of people commented, some sharing their own workplace horror stories, others cheering me on. One comment stuck with me: "This is the most satisfying revenge I've ever read. You didn't just win, you healed." And maybe that's what real revenge is. Not ruining someone else's life, but rebuilding your own. If I could go back, I'd still take that job, because it taught me something priceless. People like Mark exist everywhere. You can't always stop them from hurting you, but you can decide how you respond. And sometimes the best revenge isn't about fighting louder. It's about letting them dig their own grave while you quietly hand them the shovel. So if you're sitting there, wondering how to get even with someone who wronged you, remember, the most powerful line you can deliver isn't "I'll destroy you." It's "I'm moving on." Because by the time they realize you've already won, it's too late for them to catch up.